Hi guys, my name's Lizi and I'm a story hunter. Now what is story hunting? Well, you've all heard of storytelling, I'm sure. So storytelling is the ability to go out and find the right stories. But story hunting is really about digging down to the story that you need the most. In today's world, we feel a little bit of a kind of an overload at the moment. There's so many stories, there's so many pieces of content that are out there. So how are you making the right pieces of content for your platform? I don't need to go into exactly how many pieces of content there are, because you're inundated with them personally every day. Your Facebook stream, your Instagram, just the fact that there are 8 billion average daily views on Facebook is just one small fact that my Octagon Insights team derived. But these stories, they can be very kind of curated. They're very almost, I wouldn't say fake, but they're certainly sitting on that edge of perfection. So everything is captioned, curated, almost kind of filtered into this world that we're not sure how perfect it all really is. Now, over the last 12 years, I've been studying brands and the stories that they tell, especially in the sports and entertainment space, and I've been looking at the ones that are doing it highly successfully. So there's a brilliant article that's been put out by Frucht. It's a research paper about the most entertaining brand qualities that there are. Now, Nike is a hell of a brand to aspire to, but why don't we learn from them? So some of their best entertaining brand qualities show up uniqueness, originality, and inclusiveness. Now, this is certainly something we can all do. The way that they're doing it, though, is they're doing it very much in an authentic manner. They're entertaining us, but they're doing it with real stories. And they're really starting to push the boundaries of how authentic that is. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is how to earn attention for your brand, for your platform, 3 ways. So you need the right story, you need the right audience, and you need to speak to them in the right way. Now, just to make it slightly entertaining, I've called those 3 things story hunting, of which I am a story hunter. Passion drivers. Now, these are the particular ways that you need to interact with your audience. And you obviously need a strategy to go with that, a content strategy, if you will. So story hunting. Yep, this is what I am. And if we're going to talk about it in an authentic way, I thought I'd show you a little bit of my story and how I've got to where I am. So about age 6, I turned around to my mum and I said, right, that's it, I'm off. I've got a lot of the world to go and see. Now, she did manage to convince me to stay a little while longer, but it did mean that I was off to find all the stories of the world. What are those stories that really kind of inspire us or invoke action in us? What are the ones that bring us together? Now, to be a really good story hunter, I think it gives you skills outside of the marketing world. Certainly makes you more entertaining at a dinner party. Everybody loves a good story. But it also gives you the ability to go and find those stories that are really kind of beyond the surface of what you're looking for. So you can go and find the stories that tell a real deep value and bring those to life. Now, I've been fortunate enough to work on incredibly large programs. So working with Steven Gerrard and the Liverpool football team, for any of those football fans out there. But it wasn't the big stories, the flashy ones that everybody wants to hear about. It's often the really softly spoken ones. And I'll talk you through a couple of those campaigns. Never overlook the people that help you run your events, or those that kind of demonstrate the values that you have. The officials, who are often the quietly spoken ones, or the volunteers, as we just heard from Parkrun, their stories can be as valuable as the people competing. Stories you're hunting for can be found in the loudest of places and the celebrations of everybody that's gone through the event, but they can also be found in the quietest moments, the moments when you sit and have a cup of tea with somebody afterwards. So the things that you need to be looking for in your stories, well, we're all drawn to like-minded people, the people that sit on the beach with us and make sure that everybody's safe, or the people that share our values and our want to be in part of a community. However, don't get me wrong, humans are very cynical. They will not always believe you and what you're about to tell them. However, if you keep trying, they might just. And for those of us who are cyclists in the room, be single-minded, not just with your fixie, but with your story. So let me jump into some case studies to really show how I've brought this to life. So as I spoke about a moment ago, Liverpool Football Club work with Standard Chartered Bank, and they're my client out here in Asia. Now Liverpool is in the north of England. It's often quite cold, almost the opposite of the tropical Singapore that you're sitting in right now. So why on earth are there 560 million Liverpool fans around the world? And how many of them have actually got the chance to go to Liverpool and Anfield? We're pulling these two worlds apart, and Standard Chartered Bank wants to talk to everybody in Asia about their football fandom. Now, I could go glitz and glam and I could show you every player under the sun, or I could look at slightly quieter stories. And having done a season's worth of content, this is the one that captured the hearts of all the fans around the world. This is the story of Pat Rodaway. He's been a fan of Liverpool for many, many moons. Now, he's not your average fan, because he goes to every game, but he is actually completely blind and has never seen one of the games. But he feels them, and he's part of a community. And the piece that I'm going to talk you through, the one that we won the Innovation of the Year for, was actually for an incredibly simple piece of technology. So my job as a story hunter is to find stories like this, but then to bring them to life in really unusual and unique ways to catch the audience's attention. So this is a microphone that has two ears on either side of it. It means it captures a binaural audio effect, which is the closest you'll get to human hearing. The reason there are ears on there is because your ears actually change the effect of being in a room, being in a stadium, being in a space. So what we did is we brought Pat's story to life, and I'm going to let you guys watch that.
How can one visually impaired man enable millions of fans around the world to see football differently? 99% of Liverpool fans in Asia will never set foot inside of the club's stadium, Anfield, and experience 50,000 people singing "You'll Never Walk Alone." So how could Standard Chartered Bank help these fans not only hear what this is like, but feel it as well? Introducing Pat Rodaway.
I've been a Liverpool fan from roughly 1966-67. Well, I've never had vision. Football's about feeling the atmosphere as well as what's around you.
Pat's heightened sense of hearing enabled him, together with 3D binaural audio technology, to replicate the emotional nuances and detail of fan experiences inside the stadium. Using special binaural audio equipment, we recorded the iconic anthem in a way that conventional microphones cannot achieve. This resulted in a 360-degree audio effect, transporting the listener deep into the cop.
These microphones can hear exactly like humans can.
Working purely in the medium of sound allowed us an opportunity to approach the task of immersive storytelling from a whole new perspective. Anfield Amplified was launched on World Sight Day. The audio was supported with video content as an awareness push for Standard Chartered's long-term partnership with the charity Seeing is Believing. The results were better than we could have ever imagined. Anfield Amplified showed the less we see with our eyes, the more we can see with our hearts.
Okay, so I did sneak a couple of football players in there. I'm not going to lie. We often use those guys to help amplify our messages. And so when you have got key people in your field and you can get them or access to them to help you share your message, always please do. However, it was Pat's story and how much he wanted to give the top to everybody and all those fans in Asia, because that's the piece that all the fans crave. They want to be in that beloved stadium. They want to know what it feels like to eat that pie and to have somebody step on your toe as you're jumping for joy when they finally score. I won't talk about the 4-0 win that happened the other day, but I will start to talk to you about the audience, because this is quite a crucial part. So as I was looking at who I needed to deliver a story to and how I went and found Pat's story, it was actually looking at the passion drivers. So the drivers that really get your audience going about your particular topic. These are the things that you need to know about in depth to be able to correlate that story. So Octagon's been running for many years, and they have these 12 different passion drivers that can be identified in different fandom. Now it goes everything through active appreciation, so that'll be your park run, people who actually love turning up and taking part in the run. Socializing and talking. Now this is happening a lot more frequently across all sport, mainly because we're seeing it as one of the last live pieces. If you have to tune in at exactly that time, otherwise you get stuck with the highlights. Now there's a couple of things like gloating. That's definitely something that we attribute to football, but that's very different to how we'd attribute different pieces to rugby or to other sports, whether it's the Olympics and we're seeing cross-sport pieces, or if we're actually looking at more entertaining sports. So just to show a quick example, football, soccer on the left, this is all about player excitement and gloating. So player excitement means I'm very tribal, so I very much stick to Liverpool and only Liverpool, although I am a Man U fan, so don't please tell my client. But it is very tribal in its nature. People will get up and they will scream blue murder about their team and their team only. But player excitement sits alongside that. So you love the idea of going to see Ronaldo and to see him perform. Doesn't matter which team he's playing for, you're intrigued. And gloating is a very big one. We see it happen a lot, especially across social media. It's not just the fact that I want my team to win, I want your team to lose. And I'm quite happy to rub it in your face when it's happened. Rugby, however, has a very different passion driver set. So this means we talk to the fans very differently. With rugby, it's very much about the love of the game. Yes, I'll support the England team, but actually I'll watch any rugby that's on. If New Zealand come on, why not? Let's have a little bit of a laugh and watch them play as well. Player affinity is very different to player excitement, and these are the nuances that you start to learn. So player excitement, I'll watch Ronaldo play because I'm incredibly amazed by his skills, versus player affinity. Some of those players in the rugby teams, I want to be like them. I like their values that they bring to the game, and I support who they are. In fact, I might even want to follow some of the charities that they put forward, or I want to learn a bit more about how they go about their lives. And it was this knowledge that we took when we actually worked with the Australian rugby team. Now, luckily, as a marketer, I have the ability to cross allegiances, and I can still work on the Australian rugby team even if I am English. But it was knowing those rugby factors and that kind of absolute sort of player affinity that we went and found some really important stories. So Dove Men Care actually wanted to work with the rugby team. Awesome, sounds interesting. However, Dove is very much about kind of facial products and deodorants. How on earth can I take a whole load of buffet rugby players and make them stand up for something that is of value? So of course I had to squash all of the stereotypes of masculinity, which of course I've just laid across this presentation. Now looking at it, we had a sponsorship of a whole team. But actually it wasn't the team that we wanted to hone in on, it was that player affinity, and we found one player, David Pocock, who his arm is currently tied to a coal mine, which he's trying to stop. He stood up for several different challenges during the game. In fact, he stopped a game for homophobic slurs. And he's done several things where he's stood up for different rights that are outside his own, just to make a point about who he is as a human being. So what we did is we took a brave client and we went and joined David and his wife at their home for several weeks. I had to convince a client that we weren't going to write a script or make kind of a content series that was already preconceived. I wanted to go and sit in his house and find out who he really was. Now, it took a lot for David to allow this to happen. He'd never worked with a brand before, and he had a very big moral compass. But in doing so, we built a relationship with him, and it enabled us to find out what those stories were and who he was, and we aligned that to the brand. So Dove is all about care. Now, we took that value and we interpreted it in a way of you have to have strength to care. So you have to be a strong man and you have to know who you are to be able to care for yourself and for others. So this is just one of the pieces of work that we made with David.
This whole sort of individual achievement thing is such a myth. You're growing up and you're sold a certain sort of brand of masculinity. I've certainly grown up in a world where I'm far more valued as a person if I'm achieving things. There's been lots of times when I've turned to Emma for support. I think through injury, she's been one of the few people that I can be really honest with how I'm feeling, not have to try and put on a brave face.
So Dave's got like all the IP in the garden and I'm the
labourer.
Grunt.
Men, generally myself included, want to be the person who does it themselves, who's viewed as strong.
It's been quite difficult for me as well to resist that urge to want him to just be the white knight on his horse and actually create space for him to be sad or hurt or frustrated.
We all want to be the person who looks like they've got it all together. It's just not the case. Like, we've all got things that we struggle with. I think it's often in showing our fears, our vulnerabilities, we actually feel like we belong more.
Okay, so it's a really beautiful video. I highly recommend everybody jumping onto YouTube and watching it afterwards. There was actually 3 of them that were made. We made letting your guard down, we talked about standing up for others, and we looked at what it is to look after yourself, so kind of personal, mental care. Now, these were really wonderful pieces and projects to work on. It actually allowed us to build up a base of stories that really had a nice bit of value to it. It started breaking down the walls of masculinity in Australia, of which there are quite a few. Just putting these out captured news attention for us. And it was new conversations that came out around homophobia, around looking after yourself mentally and physically. And the nice bit of working with David in this manner that was incredibly kind of authentic was that he still talks about it today. He still, even long after the kind of the small budget that we worked with him on has gone, he still talks about having the strength to care because it was something that was very kind of true to him. Okay, so we're up to the right way. And this is the right way to give your stories to the audience. A content strategy, if you will. Now, there's a few boring slides in here, so feel free to give me a nod if you'd like me to speed up. But what you need to be able to do is to look at your brand value, your story value, and your human value. And it's when those 3 come together, that's when you're making content that's incredibly rich. So, for example, with Standard Chartered Bank, their whole brand value is about being better together. The story value was about kind of going and finding a really personal story of Pat's want to help others be a part of something. And the human value is about belonging. You're belonging to that community. You're being invited in to Anfield, into the COP in an incredibly new way. With the Dove piece, it was a little bit different. So the brand value with Dove was care, and it's kind of the strength to care, if you will. It was David's story value that kind of allowed go and look for the different ways that you can care for yourself and for others. And then it is that human value of kind of wanting to know what the right way is to be the right human being in this world. Now, when you're building a content strategy, there's different pieces you need to learn about. I often follow the Hero, Hub, and Help model. This is a model that was developed by Google and has been running for the last few years. Hero is your piece that is beautifully shot. it goes out across all your platforms, and it's a real attention earner. It's the one where you spend a little bit of money. Your hub are the pieces you come back to, so they have the frequent pink spikes. It's the repetition. This is the fact that you're going to come back week in, week out. And then your help is the baseline. This is the piece that really pulls together the sponsorship to a brand or to how to find where you are. Those real kind of messages that you need to get that are very factual. Now your story in this matrix, your hero should have 80% of like value and big ideas, and just 20% of who your brand is, your sponsor, anything that kind of is very kind of logistics. Your hub can be a 50-50 split. So this is the piece that you keep coming back to. And your help should be very, very functional. This is how do I find the partner? This is who's running it and who will be there. But it should definitely have a nice sort of flavour of your brand to it. And of course, just to add an extra H to our hero, our hub, and our help, we've got a halo. So for every piece of work that I created with Dove, and that story that you just saw with David Pocock, it needed a halo piece that went around it. So these are the smaller kind of touch points. It basically means that you're left with lots of pieces of content. You should have a really rich database. So when we were working with AIG, we looked at not just making one film, but what are those snippets that can be placed across the different social channels that everybody's on, whether it is Instagram, Snapchat, filters, that side of things, but kind of trying to put it into a medium that they really want to taste it in. So for my last case study, I'm going to look again at Liverpool. Apologies for all those fans out there that support somebody else, but it's a really good demonstration of how to build up your content series. So if we're talking to fans across Asia Pacific, but also every now and again we talk to the fans basically outside of the UK. So it is quite a global piece of work. Now last year, Liverpool Football Club celebrated 125 years. Why on earth would anybody who's quite a new fan, so fandom for Liverpool is fairly new across Asia, why do we care? How do I get somebody over this side of the world to care about 125 years of history? And this is where you start to look at the values and which align. So in Asia, numbers is a really huge part of culture. And because Standard Chartered are a bank, they obviously know quite a lot about numbers. So we looked at creating a content series called Standard Chartered Celebrates the Power of Numbers. Now, we looked at a real range of numbers that represented something in Asia, but also represented something very big for the club. And we put these into a series. We released it over an entire season, so July to July, a year long, and we built it out with our Hero Hub and our hygiene. Now, this meant that the different came out different timings to them, but it also had different layers of how much of the bank we dialed up versus how much of the fandom we looked at. This is a really wonderful campaign to work on, and I'm going to let you watch the case study video to give you a better understanding of how it came to life.
How can you give Asian fans personal meaning to the 125th year celebrations of an English football club? Standard Chartered Bank needed to connect with fans across Asia to celebrate an iconic season of Liverpool Football Club. It all started with a number. In cultures across Asia, numbers hold significant symbolic meaning, and Standard Chartered Bank understands that every number is as important as the story of opportunity that sits behind it. So we created an entire season-long content campaign that allowed fans all over the world to celebrate the power of numbers with more than 240 pieces of content across digital, audio and print in 7 different languages. We timed the release of each to a key moment during the iconic 125th season. It all launched with Liverpool legend and famous number 8, Steven Gerrard.
Has there been anyone who has ever led Liverpool with more heart?
We created an immersive 360-degree binaural experience with the club's iconic anthem, first sung in 1964. A visually impaired fan helped us capture the experience and echoed the power of community.
You'd think you were actually there, listening and singing.
Number 7, Liverpool's most iconic jersey number, was brought to life with an interactive children's storybook celebrating the legacy of Liverpool legend Kenny Dalglish. The power of numbers reached over 80 million fans worldwide, generated 279 million impressions, and was used in more than 40 local market campaigns, making it the most effective sponsorship campaign ever for Standard Chartered. And Liverpool Football Club made the Champions League final for the first time in over a decade. We'd like to think we played a small part in that. To us, that is the power of numbers.
You may or may not have noticed at the end of that case study, I think somebody laid claim to the fact that they got Liverpool into the Champions League final. I don't think our campaign's that good, but it certainly raised a few eyebrows across the world. The really lovely part of it is it did contain several different parts to it. So instead of just doing filmed content, we had different ways that people could interact with it. The audio piece, which if you have a chance to go and listen to, is quite fantastic. You put the headphones on and you close your eyes and you could be in the Kop. We also had a hardback storybook that was done with Kenny Dalglish. And this was a rhyming couplets that people were able to get access to. And it came from the insight that when you're talking about legacy and you're aware of what you're doing with your children, it's often when they're sitting in bed and you're reading them a good night story. And so taking that kind of insight and bringing it to life meant that parents could talk about their legacy with their children in an interesting way. Now, I've talked you through story hunting, which is almost the element of kind of going that little bit deeper than you really need to, finding those stories that nobody else has considered. We've looked at the passion drivers, so this is the research that sits behind them. Who are your fans and how are you really talking to them and engaging them? And then a content strategy. You need to be able to put things in place to be able to bring it to life in the right way. Because basically what I believe in today's world where there's constant distraction, there is so many different ways that people are talking to the audiences. They really do want to connect with the things that they love, where the shared value is. And they're okay with brands stepping into that space when they're enabling you to get closer to it, to get an understanding of their fandom and allowing them to have more of it is actually seen as okay. So basically, I want us to all go away and make more incredible stories. There's technically 7 billion stories on this planet, so you've got plenty to hunt from. Thank you very much.